Hello friends, my name is Fanroll, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite open world builds. Since posting my videos, I've gotten quite a few requests about the different builds I'm featuring. And as some keen viewers have noticed, I value speed a lot when I'm farming. So I thought I'd start sharing my builds every now and then, and if there's a particular class you are interested in, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. As you might have guessed from the thumbnail, today I'll be showing you my Deadeye build. This build is one of my favorites to farm on, run around in the open world, and generally kill any enemy I see. This build features very high range damage without a build-up, allowing us to move from mob to mob in a very efficient manner. We will have near permanent boss up, even without using the Jade offensive and defensive protocols we can get in End of Dragons. And by changing 2 traits, you'll be well equipped to fight some of the harder enemies in the open world as well. Before I dive in, I do have a brief note on killing mobs in the open world. It is general assumed knowledge that this is a bad way to farm in Guild Wars 2. Yet, this has been one of my fastest ways to acquire spirit shards as well as karma. There is a slight caveat, as I do gain an experience bonus from a candy corn gobbler, and if you have access to celebration boosters, you can even increase the experience even further. I do have a more in-depth video planned on this subject, where I'll be going over my favorite methods, the requirements, and any other things you might want to know. Now let's take a look at the trait lines of our builds and how they will benefit us when playing. Trickery is our first trait line, and this will aid us with initiative management, as it adds 3 initiative to our total, which will allow us to spam our skills more. On top of that, it also refunds 2 initiative every time we mark an enemy. Another great thing about this trait line is that our damage will be increased for each point of initiative spent. And the Grandmaster trait Sleight of Hand will reduce the cooldown of our mark by 20%, which was just a solid quality of life. Next up, we have Critical Strikes. This will increase our critical chance by 15% when our health is above 75%, and increases our damage and critical strike another 7% while our health is above 90%. This trait line will allow us to maintain permanent fury, which will increase our critical damage and adds another critical damage bonus against mobs above 50% HP. And then finally, we get to our Deadeye traits. Our steal mechanic will get replaced by mark when we're playing a Deadeye. This allows us to mark enemies from afar and grants us access to a new resource called Malice. You can build up Malice by spending initiative points on attacks on a marked target. And when we go into stealth, our first attack becomes Death's Judgment, which deals very high damage. This attack can be boosted even further the more Malice we have. So generally, we want to use this every time we build up to 5 Malice. This is also where our first trait, Malicious Intent, will offer us some great quality of life. Because every time we mark an enemy, we will gain 1 Malice, and with our Malice cap being 5, we're gonna try to not waste any. Our second skill, Skirmisher Shot, will grant us 2 Malice each time we use it. So marking a target and then using Skirmisher Shot twice will get us exactly to our cap. When you're fighting mobs in the open world, you want to use Skirmisher Shot, which also pierces targets when you're running around. If you're fighting tougher enemies, however, you want to kneel down and use double tap instead. And then we get to why our build excels at killing enemies in the open world. Every time you kill a marked target, Mark's cooldown will reset and give you 3 seconds of regeneration. Combined with our second trait, Payback, which shortens the cooldown of one of our utilities by 20% each time a mark dies, this combination will keep most of our utilities off cooldown without a real need for alacrity. And finally, we slot in Be Quick or Be Killed, which will give us permanent quickness as long as we keep killing mobs. Now, if you're fighting stronger enemies, such as champions or meta-event bosses, you can change Payback to Silent Scope and Be Quick or Be Killed to Maleficent 7. Silent Scope will grant us stealth every time we dodge, and this allows us to keep chaining Death's Judgments every time we hit max Malice. Maleficent 7 will increase our Malice cap to 7 and grants us a ridiculous amount of buffs each time we reach that number. As for the utility skills, I will be recommending a general set that works well in any circumstance, but I'm gonna go over some alternatives that might be useful to you depending on your situation or your preferred playstyle. I generally run Hide in Shadows as my healing skill. This gives me a second opportunity to stealth if my mark target isn't dead yet and my mark is still on cooldown. If you want more condition cleanse and faster healing, Withdraw is a great replacement, or if you just want some extra passive healing, you can simply take Signet of Malice. Our first utility will be Haste. This is gonna give us access to 3 valuable buffs, but is also an instant cast stun break. On top of that, it removes 1 condition thanks to the Trickster trait we chose in the Trickery trait line. Next, I always slot Shadow Step on my bar. This is a long-range instant teleport that also breaks stuns. You can activate the skill a second time to revert back to your original position if you want to. And our final utility skill is Assassin's Signet, which grants us extra power, and you can activate it to boost your damage even further. If you would like more access to stealth, Shadow Refuge or Blinding Power could be very nice replacements. Or if you want an extra reset for your mark, Mercy is actually an excellent utility. While if you want to slot in Shadow Flare, you can get access to some more AoE damage and an extra teleport. As for our elite skill, Dagger Storm will allow us to AoE damage mobs around us and evade attacks while doing so. And thanks to our payback traits, you will never have to wait too long for this skill to get off cooldown. If you're fighting stronger mobs and chose to slot in Silent Scope and Maleficent 7, you should change this to Shadow Meld instead. And then we get to the gear. If you're on a tight budget, you can run a general rage setup by going Berserker's gear with Runes of Scholar and Sigils of Force and Impact in your weapon. This works perfectly fine, and this is what I personally ran when I didn't have access to legendaries and I didn't have that much gold yet. If you want to go all out and splurge, you can change your trinkets to Marauder's trinkets, which gives a nice HP boost. And additionally, I started running Runes of Speed in my armor set. This is actually one of the most misunderstood rune sets in the game, and sadly also quite an expensive one. The extra speed bonus you get from this set does absolutely nothing for you when you're not in combat, but I don't mind about that because that's when I'm using Mons. But when you're engaged in combat, you'll be running around at near super speed levels. Super speed allows you to run at 400 units per second in combat. Not all classes have access to this though, and most of them just have to make do with swiftness. Swiftness is great because you reach that same speed out of combat, but in combat you get slowed down. The Runes of Speed will actually allow us to approach super speed levels by increasing our total speed to 391 units per second. And as I mentioned earlier, I personally value speed very highly when I'm farming, and therefore that is my personal rune set of choice. For your weapons, you will want a rifle with a Sigil of Force and Impact, which is somewhat of a standard combination. In your offhand, you want a shortbow to easily allow you to tag events, and in this weapon you have some sigil choices. You can either go for Sigils of Force and Fire to aid your damage and get AoE procs, or you can go for Sigils of Cleansing and Energy, so that your dodge bar is refilled when swapping to your shortbow and an extra condition is cleansed as well. I do know that I'm committing a cardinal sin of gearing here, as I'm not reaching crit cap, but this hasn't mattered for me in the open world as most mobs die in one combo. And that's about it for this build video. I will do more of these in the future, as I have quite a few builds that I like using to farm, ranging from general purpose builds to highly specialized ones. If you have any comments or questions, make sure to leave them down below. If you liked it, please like this video, and your subscription would mean the world to me.